Welcome to Planetary Calendars, Astro Portraits. I'm Ralph D. Meachus, one of the astrologers. This week we're going to look at the chart of Dwayne Johnson, also known as The Rock, especially from his days in wrestling. He recently was listed as the most popular Instagram page, the most followed person on Instagram, which is impressive. This is millions and millions of people, but of course it comes from the fact that despite being this big, imposing guy, he's actually a lot of fun. He's funny, he's flexible, he has a very strong aesthetic sense, and he's very determined. He's very disciplined, and he does it very gracefully and with great patience. Because remember, he grew up in this field. His father was a professional wrestler. He grew up around professional wrestlers in his home. And so he understood the importance of performance. But what allows him to do it in such an interesting way and go beyond where he came from? Well, let's start with the rising. He has Libra rising, which is not considered a strong rising. Aries is considered a strong rising. The first sign, Mars. This is ruled by Venus. It makes him, among other things, very likable. The Libra rising is always saying, well, what do you think? They're always conscious of other people around them. It also gives them a very good aesthetic sense. They have a natural gracefulness. And if you watch him, even when he's really bulked up, he's a very graceful person. What's very cool is he's born May 2nd, 1972, 6:02 p.m., San Leandro, California, with Uranus right above the horizon. Now, Uranus you can't see all the time. You can see it every now and then in certain conditions. And in our lives, we don't see the Uranian energy that way. It kind of, when you see a person's eyes sparkle, that's Uranus showing up. Uranus close to the rising makes people very exciting to be around. And he's like that. People like being around him. He's just exciting. He has this alternative approach to the world. It's in Libra. So he finds alternative ways to connect with people. He also has Juno there, and then a little higher up, he has Pluto in the last degree of Virgo. So implied within there, Pluto at the rising, and it's in the Gogolon spot, shows a tremendous amount of inner power and inner determination, which is clearly there. But once again, because it's Pluto, it's hidden. Remember, Pluto, Juno, and Uranus, you can't see them with the naked eye except for Uranus every now and then. So there's hidden power in him. The first visible planet you actually see in this chart, because he has Neptune in the third house, is the Moon and Jupiter conjunct in Capricorn in the fourth house. Which is funny because in some ways Jupiter is, expansive. The moon is controlled because it's in Capricorn. In the fourth house, it's genetics. His father was a really big man. He's a really big man. The first thing you notice, I think he's 6'4". The first thing you notice about him, that first visible planet, is he's big. He's this big guy. He's big, athletic Jupiter guy with, a very good posture, Capricorn. And yet restrained. He's not effusive the way you expect from Jupiter. He's Jupiter in Capricorn. He's an 8th house native, but the only planet he has in Taurus is the Sun. Now, realize he's got Libra rising, a Venus-ruled sign. The Sun in Taurus, a Venus-ruled sign. The Moon in Capricorn, Saturn. Saturn's exalted in Libra. There's a very strong connection between that. So he has a very strong sense of the aesthetics of things, how things should look. Which, of course, when you're whether you're in wrestling or whether you're an actor, the sensitivity, how things should look, that basic graceful love of beauty is important. Any movie you ever see, if you look through the cast, you'll find someone who has the sun in Libra there. It's like obligatory that you have someone who brings that to them. And many actors have Libra significant in their chart, if not the sun, then the moon or Venus. Kate Winslet, for instance, who started acting very young, is a triple Libran, sun, moon, and rising. It's just natural to them, beauty. And to have this big, powerful man who has this great sense of beauty is charming in many ways, and he's a very likable person because of it. Now, that's not the only thing in his chart, though. Trining all this Libra and the rising are 3 planets in the 9th house in Gemini. Playful, the trickster, including Saturn, right? Mars, and Venus. So Venus, who rules the sun and the rising and has a lot of influence over the moon, is in Gemini, the sign of the trickster, conjunct Mars within 2 degrees. He's playful. He likes to get into stuff. He likes, he doesn't get too deep into it. It's one of the reasons why he ended up being, he started off as a wrestler. Well, wrestling is a very athletic sport, but it's also theater. I mean, you're not trying to get the gold medal. You're trying to put on a performance. Your engagement with the other person is the most important thing, and with the crowd. That's very much Gemini. Gemini is all about engagement. What's funny is that he has the midheaven, as many people with Libra rising do, in the 10th house, a claim. You see, the midheaven can show up in the 9th, 10th, or 11th house when you use whole sign houses, and it's a good indicator of what they're focused on. He's focused on a claim. He has the south node there. This is all in Cancer. Reincarnationally, he was famous before. He had performance before, maybe in Cancer because of his home or because of his lineage. Remember, with that strong 4th house, the moon in the 4th house, it means a lot of what comes to him is through his genetics, but also probably his spiritual genetics and through the people who helped educate him. The midheaven and the 10th house are people who like acclaim. Pallas Athena is there too, so there's something about his ability to create a home. But probably his ability to move home. He's lived in a lot of different places. People with the moon in the 4th house will live in a lot of different places. Having Jupiter there just expands it. It just expands the parameters of it. Moon in the 1st house, moon in the 4th house, they might live within 3 or 4 states, but moon with Jupiter, they'll live all over the country. Now, he has the sun in the 8th house. What does that mean? It means that he has a particular genius for managing shared resources. You put him with a group of people where resources have to be worked out, he'll find ways to move it along. It's in the sign of Taurus. So he'll do it in a graceful way, but a way that's going to benefit him. And he's become very wealthy doing this, working in projects where he's working cooperatively with other people. But this is the only thing he has in Taurus. But you see him, when you hear him, you look at him and think, oh, that's a Taurian. It's a very strong position. Why? Because the sun is above the horizon. When the sun is above the horizon in the daytime chart, the sun is strong. The moon is below the horizon here, and it's also in its detriment sign. It's the sign opposite Cancer, so it's very introvert. His home life is very important to him. It's internalized. I mean, it's funny, the 2 sides of his personality are very evident. He's really got a social exterior professional life, and then this very strong personal life that he keeps a part of that reserved. Though I think with Jupiter there and the moon there, in his home, he's very generous to people. Kind of bigger than life. That's Jupiter there. And let's talk a little bit about that Venus, Mars, and Saturn in the 9th house. 9th house is the house of the athlete. He has Mars there, right? Mars likes being in the 9th house. And many times with professional athletes, you'll find Mars or Jupiter in the 9th house. It's conjunct Venus. So it's athleticism combined with art. Well, isn't that professional wrestling? But it's also, he does a lot of action movies. I mean, how many of his movies were not action movies where he was in the lead? He's done some things where he was not the lead, where it wasn't an action movie per se. I think in Get Shorty, or maybe in the second one where he appears, he's not the main star, and yet he dances within that. I mean, there's a whole performance where he's dancing on stage. Once again, it's a physicality shows up again and again. The Saturn in Gemini, Saturn a lot of times relates very strongly to tall men, relates to trees. So, many times very tall men have strong Saturn. Sean Connery had Saturn, or had Capricorn rising. It was the classic, trined by the sun and the moon in the ninth house, and Virgo is kind of the classic tall, dark, and handsome role. And the part of fortune is conjunct that Saturn in the ninth house. So athleticism is important, but being the tall, dark man is part of the way in which he's made his living. Being that presence has been very important to him. The fact it's in Gemini makes it a huge amount of fun. And if you've seen him in movies, he can play many different roles, the serious, soldier, but he also can be very funny. And he's able to play different roles and adjust, and he has that flexibility. Mars in Gemini is a funny position because it's ruled by Mercury. So it goes back to his Mercury in Aries, which we shouldn't forget the Mercury in Aries. That Mercury in Aries is in the 7th house. It likes to engage with other people, which is kind of funny because it engages kind of aggressively, and yet he's got Chiron conjunct it. Chiron conjunct it means he understands about people's wounds. I got to think that when you come up through wrestling, you learn a lot about pain, when pain's inflicted on you by other people, because it's got to be a painful art in some ways, and also feeling for the other person. When you were Libra rising and you inflict pain on another person, you feel it. It's a tremendously, I don't want to say compassionate position, but it's a position that naturally shares another person's pain. Because they understand implicitly that they're there with you, that your actions upon them are going to affect you as well. You smack someone, well, you got to figure they might want to smack you back. And that's that Aries in the 6th house. That's controlling all that stuff up in the 9th, right? But the Mercury is in Aries, so the Mercury and the Mars are a mutual reception. So you have two planets that both like to get into it, that both like to engage, that keep feeding each other in a very playful, aggressive way, which describes so much about why he's willing to get into things and take on projects, and it gives him a lot of energy, and yet it's all balanced on either side of who? The Sun in Taurus, patiently managing the shared resources for my benefit and my comfort over the long haul, with a tremendous sense of grace and harmony and shared participation, with Uranus at the rising in a way that's kind of exciting and probably alternative. How many professional wrestlers go into the movies? Take a different route to what you want to accomplish. So that's our look at The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, a very interesting man and a very talented artist. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you come back and catch our next portrait on Tuesdays. You can see our forecasts for the coming week on Fridays. You can find both of them at Planetary Calendar Astrology on YouTube. And you can visit planetarycalendar.com for more information. And, of course, when you need your calendars and your day planners, you want to know what's going on. So I hope you found that interesting. I found it a fun chart to do. And be well.